Hello, my name is Gene Canal. I'm the Assistant Athletics Director for Promotions and Fan Engagement here at Texas Tech Athletics. I'd like to thank you for joining the 8th installment of our Hidden Figures series in recognition of Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. This is sponsored by the Texas Tech Red Raider Way, our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging initiative. At this time, we'll allow our panelists to introduce themselves, sharing your name, what you do here at Tech, and one fun fact about yourself.
My name is Yuan Xu. I'm Associate Professor of English and the Director of Asian Studies Program. And I mostly teach in contemporary American literature with a focus on ethnic American literature, Asian American literature, and the Vietnam War literature.
Hello everyone, I'm Catherine Jai. I'm Associate Professor of Retail Management, and I'm also the Associate Dean of Honors College. And what I do at Tech, I teach consumer behavior and consumer online shopping decision making. And one fact about myself, I'm left-handed and I can write my name with both hands in reverse direction.
Very nice.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellen Safayano and I play on the women's basketball team here at Texas Tech. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I'm of Samoan background and I was born in Auckland, New Zealand. And one fact about myself is that I play basketball.
Well, we'll get started. Why is it important that we celebrate AAPI month?
The interesting thing is, speak of United States of America, we always begin with the East Coast. And the East Coast was actually a sort of European or British settlement. And what really defines the United States is really the westward expansion, westward movement from the East Coast to the West Coast. And also, eventually, after the United States, what historian Bruce Cummings calls from sea to sea, dominance from sea to sea, occupying the West Coast. And then the movement continues toward Pacific. And so so sometimes I always say from the far west of North America to the far east of the Asia Pacific. Of course, in that process, there is also Hawaii, and also the Oceania, Australia, New Zealand. So that movement has really defines American history, but also defines American national identity to some extent, And so in that interesting twist, because Asian Pacific or Oceanian, the way that they come to this country, the grand narrative of the United States is from east to the west. But for Asia Pacific islanders, for Asia Pacific people, it's from west to east. So there's a reverse narrative. How we consider this narrative as part of American narrative, that's really important. And also important for American people to understand the role that the United States has played in Asia Pacific, in the island Pacific island, etc. So I think in that sense, and also not to speak that Asian Pacific Americans have contributed significantly to the building of the United States, particularly at a moment after the Civil War of the United States. The United States was in a situation that may fall apart, and so with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, partly done, by Chinese and Irish in that certain parts, and that really connect the East Coast, the West Coast, unifying the country, and also making United States a global power, because the rise of the West Coast, the rise of the United States, really contingent on, to larger extent, on the interaction on the issues, this westward movement, So I think to that extent, historically, nationally, and also to the grand narrative of the United States, it's central. Asian Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders contributed significantly to the building of this nation.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's a lot to be said about intentionality of understanding American history and how we got to how we get to. When you're studying history, and
Right.
you kind of learn about your region. So that's very interesting for sure.
Yeah, for me, I feel, and thank you, Dr. Xu, bringing this historical perspective. For me, as an immigrant, I think we always heard about United States as a melting pot, but at the same time, I feel like whenever we look back, we can look forward too. And so we need to know where we come from. And then as more and more immigrants from Asia and the Pacific Islanders, and they're moving into this and become part of our society, knowing the history in the back and they recognize our heritage are also very important. Understanding all of us are contributing partners into this ever-evolving society.
Yeah, very interesting. Ella, so, being someone from New Zealand and of Samoan descent, what is it like navigating through life and school here in West Texas?
It's been very different. I got on the plane in 2017 when I think I was 17, turning 18, and I moved to Midland, Texas from Sydney, Australia. And Sydney, Australia is a very, very diverse place. And then I'm moving to Midland, which is obviously known for oil, and it's obviously predominantly white as well. So I remember flying in and I was like, man, what did I just do? It's kind of flat, dry, red dirt, which Australia mostly is, but obviously growing up in the suburbs and the city was very different. But just knowing who I was growing up and knowing a lot about my culture and growing up with pretty traditional parents helped me navigate through a lot of things. And I think a lot of Samoan traditions align with a lot of the ideals here in West Texas, kind of just being family-oriented, loyalty, and just kind of taking off your shirt off your back and giving it to the person that you barely know. So I thought I fit in really well in Midland. And then moving around Texas, there was going through the recruiting process out of junior college. I wanted to stay in Texas because of the traditions and the culture in the South. Again, like I said, it aligned a lot with the Samoan traditions. And so I went to College Station, didn't work out very well for me. And then I moved back to Lubbock because I knew that the culture in West Texas was very similar to the ideals that I grew up. And so using my Polynesian culture to navigate through life at college has been really helpful with a lot of things, like building relationships and connections and building relationships with people who end up becoming my family. And so, yeah, and just being a part of a team. I take pride in this a lot, is just running through a brick wall for anyone that I turn up to practice with every day or work alongside with. And so that just comes from my Samoan culture. So I think it's been really fun and just being able to kind of collaborate both cultures has paid dividends to who I've become now. So yeah.
So, what do you all feel is the biggest misconception when it comes to the AAPI community here?
I think the biggest misconception is, especially for Pacific Islanders where I grew up. So I grew up in a low socioeconomic environment, and there was this conception that we were inferior to the rest of our counterparts and that we were only really qualified to pursue hard labor jobs because we weren't educated enough or we didn't have the, financial necessities or anything like that. And so I remember being in high school and I was fortunate enough to go to a Catholic private school my parents put me through. And so that kind of set me up for the rest of my life. But yeah, just having this misconception, I would have my friends that would grow up 5 minutes down the street, same environment, but went to the local public school and they were told that they weren't able to pursue education or something like that and that they were only good for those specific jobs. And so I wanted to break that stereotype and I just moved to America because my parents were like, you need to go. So I was like, okay. And then now I've graduated with a degree and I'm doing what I love. And so I just wanted to be an example for, future generations coming through that they're not inferior to anybody because of where they come from or such and such, because somebody tells them that they're supposed to conform to a stereotype. So I think that's the biggest misconception.
And what are you studying towards right now?
I'm actually applying for grad school. I hope to get into public administration or into ag business. Super random, but I've just really fallen in love with the culture here in West Texas. And I'll probably end up staying in Texas. So I have like a lot of connections in that field. So yeah, other than that, I might try athletic directing, or athletic administration, but we'll see.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. Do you all have thoughts on that question?
I probably would tell a story from my son's experience because, academia field is like an ivory tower. And then a lot of students see me as a professor, but then my son goes to the public high school here as an Asian male teenager. Like people has like these kind of model minority Asian boys. Like you must be very good at computer, at math, and then these kind of stereotype. I remember one time my son chose woodwork in middle school class, and then he is also a Boy Scout, and then he likes outdoor activities, and then one time another student just tell him that, and then when he was trying to figure out a math problem, and he said, "Leo, you're just totally upset our stereotype our Asian boy," and then. He liked to play computer, but not like a computer geek or super genius, like a math Olympian, that kind of a level. And he is interested in like a public health, and he's doing Model UN, and so he liked to talk with people, and instead of those kind of stereotype like a Silicon Valley types of engineer, that kind of image, right? I remember one time we were in Costco and shopping, and then one of another customer, an old grandfather, comes up and then say, "Hey, you look like a smart boy. Are you going to work in the Silicon Valley like after you graduate from college?" And then and we were like, maybe not. We don't know what she would choose to study in the college. And I think although people feel like a lot of Asian Americans, can be doing very well in academically, but then at the same time, we are also missing out some of the opportunities. We our next generations can have as many as opportunity, and then set the goals to do whatever they want to do. And so I think the stories make us knowing each other better. And a lot of time, I'm so appreciated as athlete department is doing these hidden figures, because I feel like by sharing these personal story, we get to know each other more, right? And then instead of just applying the intuitive stereotype on everybody that we encounter. And then I think that's the things I feel like this talk is so important, because we want to know you as a person. That is the best things I feel like we can have, and then by knowing different ethnicity groups, different people, where they come from and how they get here. Yeah,
I mean, it's such a big campus, right? It's always great to break down doors and really get people together, because we all have very similar goals, and we love our university, but it's always great to get to know each other.
Yeah, we may find more similarity among us than our differences.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Yeah, to follow up on what Catherine has just said, I think there, because she cited mostly like positive stereotypes, and I can also think of negative stereotypes, like, for example, don't know how to drive, don't speak English. So as an English professor, when I first came here, for example, I was looking for my PCP, and so had a conversation, and just randomly, so this doctor was asking me like, what are you doing, for a living? I said, well, I'm a faculty member at Texas Tech, and so what are you teaching? I hesitated at the moment, because I think if I say math engineering, the conversation would be over. But instead I say English. You teach foreign students, international students? I said, no, actually I teach upper level and also grad students as well. Really? And then so he went through that the conversation with me, and eventually he said, oh, I guess it's all right. So I was thinking that that's really interesting, and also in the classroom, you may realize that my last name, as far as enrollment is concerned, that really an issue. You know what I'm saying here as an English professor. Sometimes, if a grad student, advanced PhD student are teaching the same course, for example, the basic level course such as Introduction to Fiction, etc. Chances are, an Anglo name might get more students than me with obviously Asian name there. So those are things that there's an issue of authority. When you because I mean. In writing, you can show that I have a degree actually, as a way to suggest that I'm qualified to teach. But that's really that issue of not just linguistic authority, but also cultural authority. What defines what defines America and how your language, your linguistic experience, your cultural experience can actually redefine and enrich the not necessarily the vocabulary, but also the cultural thing here. I think that's really kind of important. So in that sense, I think I try to turn this sometimes not exactly a positive experience into positive experiences. So I think that's something that I guess I have to wrestle with, continue to wrestle with. So that is something that I'm aware. I never tried that. I never lied that I'm a math professor, engineering professor, but I assume that if I did, the conversation would be like, oh yeah, sure, so there'll be no conversation. But whenever I say English, it was always like, oh, which aspect of English? Or if you say like, as American literature, and then the conversation will last for quite a while. But if you just say like, I just teach composition, I just teach international students, and then the conversation will be over sooner, so that's a kind of interesting experience.
Absolutely. Looking back, Ella, you mentioned that you're pursuing your education. Obviously, two doctors here who are very accomplished. What was it like pursuing your PhD, getting your education, and kind of getting to this point in your career?
For me, I started my PhD in 2007, and actually, originally I come from Taiwan, and I met my major professor back in Taiwan when she was a visiting scholar there, and so she recruited me to study PhD in Oregon State, and so I completed. I didn't come to study PhD with the American dream. Like I want to stay here and find a job, buy the house, and have a family here. And so I was thinking, because my alma mater wanted me to study PhD in the US, get a degree, and come back to teach there. They still continue to recruit me now, until now. That is still nowadays. So the thing is, after 3 years later, after I complete my PhD, I had this opportunity, met one faculty from the hospitality and retail management in the career fair, and then Dr. Deborah Fowler invited me to apply the job here, and I was like, that was like a year 2009, the second mortgage crisis. The whole United States only have like a position left, like a university-wide for the retail merchandising position. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try and then see how far I can go, right? And then now here, this is my 12th year in Texas Tech. And so I feel like this is my PhD to where I am now. I have been the assistant professor. I got tenure here. I was the graduate program director, and then now the associate dean of Honors College. I really appreciate all the opportunities once I entered the academia field here and doing research, the resources that I was able to get to. I'm not sure what's the next step for me, but the amazing things I feel like coming to the US, starting from study PhD here, is I can continue to have that kind of mindset is, I don't know how far I can go, but I will try. And I think that's the most amazing things in here for all the immigrants or the generations with come from different heritage, is this society provides tremendous opportunities here, and so that everyone can have that kind of mindset. I will try and then see how far I can reach. So that's my like from PhD to here. So I of course I'm escaping a lot of like a late night sleep, overnight, doing research and then getting paper published, and then the a heartbroken moment when my a manuscript get rejected numerous times. But then I still keep going forward, and then and trying very hard to utilize the resources and opportunity here, and then to teach students and to contribute to the community here.
Well, I mean, very similar to Catherine. I came to this country with the idea of studying American studies and American literature specifically, and hoping that going back, to teach American literature and American studies to the Chinese, students. But as I continued my studies, I pursued my PhD at Indiana University at Bloomington, and by the way, I came here in 2000, and then Indiana basketball coach Bobby Knight also came here, and so I always joke with my students that he followed me to Texas Tech.
I followed you.
So, well, I mean, I went Indiana, and I studied there for a long time, and I initially, at some point, my perspective, my idea changed, because I was thinking that I realized that there's so much understanding about Asian and Asian Americans in this country that there's a lot I can do to improve that. That's one thing. Another thing is I was hoping that to do something to the U.S.-China relations, because that's another field that there was a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of things that can be done. So what I've been doing in all these years, particularly after I came to Texas Tech, and I served in 2006, I started serving as the director of comparative literature. So I organized a couple of symposia on America's Asia, Asia's America. I organized migration border and the nation state. I organized the American studies as transnational practice. And so I have did a lot of scholarship. I co-added 2 books on this issue of transnational American studies. And I also did 3 special journal issues on this on the same topic, And so in 2017, I served as a Fulbright scholar at the National University of Singapore, and during that time I lectured at the University of Philippines, Manila. Actually, it's Diliman, Manila/Manila. I talk about American studies there and interact with students there, faculty as well. And also I lectured at a University of Indonesia, Salamba, exposed to students about American culture, American studies, and all these talks are really popular there, and they demanded we wish we have more exchange with scholars based in the U.S. And also I visited another school at a different time in Indonesia. It's called Maranatha Christian University in Bandung, Indonesia. And then I also went to visit Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, Thailand. And throughout these visits, I was able to interact with students. I was able to expose them to the latest methodology, latest scholarship, latest topics, etc. So I had a really good interaction with students and the faculties there. And so, for example, Chulalongkorn, Dean of Arts and Sciences, invited me to apply for a fellowship and then teach at the university for 1 semester or something, So that really, I feel like really very satisfied with all this work. And of course, I also lectured in other places as well. I visited the University of Sydney,
It's a great
Australia.
university.
I did 2 lectures there. I did like I actually sort of co-taught one text with the professor there, so interacting with students. And also I did a lecture at the U.S. Studies, Institute of U.S. Studies, So I also love Australian accent because, I mean, on the way when I flew from Houston to Sydney, instead of say any rubbish and say any trash, they would say any rubbish. I thought that was very charming to say that, So I really love Australia, giving talks there, and also lectured in China as well. And I was involved in the Stanford Digital Humanities Project. So they flew us to China, to Guangzhou, China, and also they flew us to Academic Sinica in Taiwan, Taipei, So really presented work there and interacted with both scholars there. So that was very satisfying, gratifying, And so I think that I'm trying to help promote understanding between peoples, and also. In 2018, I organized the symposium at Hong Kong University and then Tsinghua University in China, and during after my tenure as a Fulbright, I went back to Singapore to co-organize a symposium in Singapore, and it was very satisfying, So we met all kinds of scholars. We talk about those issues. So I think that's I think I maybe I did more than just the returning back and teach in China or something. So in that sense, to that extent, I feel very happy about being a faculty member here, and of course I enjoy doing things locally as well. So like I said, I organized the Chinese Faculty and Staff Association on campus, and so we did a lot of work, and so in my inauguration speech, I said Texas Tech is our family, Lubbock our home. Or the other way, Texas Tech is our family, and Lubbock is our home. So I think that's really says about what most people from the Asia Pacific feel about Texas Tech, about Lubbock.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate to have both of you teaching on campus here and molding the young minds here at Texas Tech. What a gift it is to have you guys here in Lubbock. Ella, looking, you kind of touched on this earlier, but what are some of the cultural traditions and things that you were able to bring over here that you look back on fondly from your background?
I wouldn't say I've brought too many traditions back. I just think with my teammates, I love to have them over, and hospitality is a really big thing in our culture, and cooking big meals and feeding my kids, aka the freshmen. So having them over. Church is a tradition as well, and family. And so when I was in Midland, my family there, I would go to church with them on Sundays when I could, when I was able to make it. And so just feeling that sense of family and just being together, that was a really big thing. And then afterwards, there's this thing called Gongai, which is Sunday feast. And you usually eat after church with your family. So that's what the kids, I remember growing up, that's what we used to look forward to. I mean, we should be looking forward to church, but we were looking forward to the food after. And just honestly, a lot of my qualities as a person, the traditions that I probably brought over is just family and kind of just dropping everything for my people, even though I probably have homework to do or something, and just being able to visit with people. So those are some of the traditions I think I've brought over. And yeah, just being able to talk about my upbringing and talk about Polynesian culture and stuff like that, I think are traditions that kind of carry throughout naturally and subconsciously. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I've brought over to Texas.
Sure. And I'd even, ask you all, what are some traditions that you all brought to Lubbock that you admire from your cultures as well?
Culturally, I think Chinese New Year, and then I remember when my son is in elementary school, we usually parents will bring in the decorations and into the school, decorate it and explain the culture and tradition to the kids. And then when they grow up, then we start to celebrate more at home rather than like in school, because it's more like academic focused. And so these are the things are very important. I agree with Ella, like food is totally like a very important. So we will make like a traditional dumplings, noodles, and then the home meals, and then to have the friends over. And then I remember one time in the Boy Scout, like a blue and gold banquet, I brought like a pot stickers, and then with the homemade sauce, and then we have other parents and say, what's this? And then I will explain the ingredient to them, and I'm so feel like happy that they all tried. And then I feel like that's the moment that we share our tradition and heritage through food, through the explanation of the background, and then we find like a common ground, and then start a conversation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, very similarly, because when I organized this Faculty Staff Association back in 2009, I believe, one thing that I introduced was the Chinese New Year luncheon. So that I invited the Texas Tech administration, top administration, upper administration to leaders to our luncheon, and so we did a little bit of celebration. And typically, I introduced what a Chinese New Year is all about, and also back then there was a lot of interaction, so we were able to purchase some books about a celebration of Chinese festivals, and sometimes we do like a mid-autumn cake moon festival, So there are a couple of things that we celebrate at Texas Tech. And also right now, as director of the Asian Studies program, I've also been trying to organize like a speaker series. For example, this semester I organized three lectures via Zoom because of a limited budget. So I mostly do like through via Zoom. And so the first is a talk about a Taiwan Strait, in which there's tension between China mainland and also Taiwan. So I invited a speaker who is from Academic Sinica in Taiwan, and he's a visiting professor at Harvard. And so he gave a very interesting analysis of the situation that really help us better understand the situation in East Asia. The second lecture is about Chinese film, Chinese cinema, and amazingly given by a professor at UCLA. And to my surprise, he was able to talk about the collaboration between Hollywood and some Chinese corporations like Alibaba, how Alibaba put money behind a lot of major U.S. films. So that collaboration, that exchange was very interesting, and so he showcased a couple of things, a couple of films which I wasn't aware of, and he's an Anglo-American, so it's really amazing to hear him talking about the connection between Hollywood and the Chinese cinema. And then the last speaker is about like P.F. Chang's and authenticity of Chinese cuisine. And he detailed about like the history of the rise of this restaurant in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the collaboration with the Anglo from Phoenix, Arizona. So that type of history, the details, and also their insistence on the authenticity of Chinese cuisine, I find really fascinating. That most people, I'm just interested in those kind of details, sharing this kind of specifics about what constitute, what it means by authenticity, and how this catering to different consumers, etc. So those are really very interesting things when we see how culture would sort of is like negotiated, is like exchanged through this. There's the everyday practice through food stuff, and through like sharing of festivals, sharing of certain things, and I think those are really good way to understand rather than just to talk about at this moment about like conflicts, about like ideological differences, etc. So I think people to people, as during the Cold War, people use that term people to people exchange or relationship. I think those are really important to help in understanding, humanize people who are different from Americans, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it sounds like wherever you're from, you got to eat, and your faith is going to be important to you, and your family is going to be important to you. So it's just a matter of how you interpret that through your own life experience. It's
right.
That's really neat. Dr. Hsu, you mentioned that you gather the faculty together, but for a student here, what are some resources that an AAPI student might have on campus that they may not be aware of?
That's really a good question. Because at Texas Tech, well, first of all, Vietnam War, Vietnam Archive is a very interesting, a resource for, even though like it's based on like mostly from the former U.S. soldiers, the GIs for fighting in Vietnam and Southeast Asia, but there are also like some donations from Vietnamese Americans as well. And so those are like, particular for Southeast Asians. And the Southeast Asians are increasingly want to find their voices in the Asia Pacific, Asian American and Pacific Islander culture, because normally they are neglected. When we speak of Asians, we typically speak of like people of Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Filipino descent. And while like Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, we usually downplay, and as these, but the children of these Vietnamese immigrants, sometimes they they don't like these terms like a boat people or those terms, and so they really those resources there at our archive, our library collection is also very good. We have a lot of work by Vietnamese immigrants, by Vietnamese refugees, etc. Really sharing those moments. This also some unique pictures of their arrival in some U.S. military bases. So these moments are very touching moments, and also like heartbreaking moments. And I think that it really helped them better understand like where they're from. And sometimes like I like the way that they crack jokes. For example, a Vietnamese comedian cracked jokes on this. And he said something to the effect that, well, remember when Puritans came to this country, they came by boat, right? Did they have passport? Did they have like visas? They didn't. So why were they called founding fathers? We were called boat people. I think that's a very good joke, and I think I love that joke because I mean, sometimes their parents or they felt like offended by this like a term boat people, but by cracking a joke on this, turn this back on the founding fathers and American history. I think that's a good way to negotiate their identities and negotiate their invisibility in the culture. And also, I brought some speakers to Texas Tech. For example, I brought in 2008, I brought Viet Thanh Nguyen to Texas Tech, and in 2016, he won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for the novel The Sympathizer. And he's writing. He has finished, and he has just finished this. Has just published the sequel to The Sympathizer. And so I've worked very closely with him and put together like panels at national conferences. So I'm thinking of bringing him back to Texas Tech, and he's an excellent speaker. He's the New York Times opinion section editor, and he has won all kinds of scholarships and etc. And he's such a brilliant speaker, and advocating for Asian American image representation, Asian American rights and social justice issues. And he was proud that he was a refugee. When he came to this country, he was 4 years old, right after the fall of Saigon, in April 30th, 1975. So his family fled Saigon and came to this country. He went through all this traumatic experience and was able to make it, to succeed in this country. And his older brother is also very successful. His brother served as the presidential advisor to President Obama as a healthcare professional. So both brothers were extremely successful, but he also went through like a traumatic experience because his dad and mom and dad started like a small business, like a grocery store sort of, and then one day somebody shot them, did not kill them, I mean fired and wounded them or something. That was very, very traumatic for the family. So they went through all these horrible experience, but they survived and they are prospering, and in this culture they are fulfilling their American dream. And so I think as a director of Asian Studies program, I'm trying to advocate, promote not just the East Asian cultures and the peoples, but also like Southeast Asians, so Vietnamese, Cambodians and Laotians, but also Pacific Islanders as well. And I've authored articles on advocating for South Pacific Island Hawaiian residents. I've been in touch with scholars in that field and promoting indigenous epistemology, etc. So I'm very happy that I'm as director, and also Texas Tech have been very supportive of my work. So I really appreciate that.
And for students, if you are international students, I think our International Culture Center it provides a lot of services to consulting with students, providing the resources to the international students. Like last week, 2 weeks ago, when we have the graduation, the ICC actually hosts the international graduation ceremony and have a banquet there. For domestic students who are AAPI heritage, we have Intercultural Center that just recently established, and that provide our domestic students who are born here with AAPI heritage a place to feel like belong to, and then talk to the other students and faculties with similar backgrounds, and then have the celebration. And then I would need to correct myself when I mentioned about the Chinese New Year. Actually, a lot of different Asian countries share the Lunar New Year traditions. So like South Koreans, Vietnamese, and they some part of Filipinos, they all celebrate the Lunar New Year. So I need to correct myself here. And then Asia is such a big and then like a culturally abundant society there. So we didn't like both. Dr. Xu and I come from like a Chinese heritage, and then although politically we belong, I come from Taiwan, he's come from China, and so there are so many dimensions in the culture, and then there's a sharing part, there's a different parts, and I bet in Australia, like different tribes that will have different cultures. That's the so I just want to make a correction here, and because thank you when Dr. Xu mentioned about the Vietnamese archive, I was suddenly like, oh yeah, I need to correct myself. It's not only Chinese New Year, it's more Lunar New Year heritage traditions shared by a lot of especially East Asia cultures and countries. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean Vietnamese celebrate, they call Tet, so it's, I mean each culture, each society uses their own term for that. Mm-hmm. So Vietnamese always celebrate the Tet, or during the Vietnam War they have Tet Offensive. That's a different story,
Yeah, it sounds like the iceberg, right? So when you first look at it, you can only see about 10%, but you really start to dig in, and there's a lot more to it, especially with cultures and stuff. Yeah.
And I think that's what make our society and culture rich, right? So all these stories and backgrounds and tradition and shape who we are right now, and then I feel like we need to admire each other's differences, and then also finding the similarities and celebrate that too.
Yeah, I think to that point, looking at the immigrant journey, right, to America, we all have different cultures, but if you look at any time in American history, any group of people that come here, it's very similar, whether it's the first generation that comes and the children of immigrants and stuff like that. So wherever you come from, it's a very similar journey, and it's really integral to American history and who we are as Americans. Ella, as an athlete, navigating college athletics, what has it been like to be from your background, and what are some challenges that you faced?
It's been a different journey, especially because you don't see too many Samoan female basketball players, and so I get super excited when we, for instance, we played against Weber State last year, and I was like, I recognized 3 Samoan girls. I could see their last names, and I could see their appearance, and I'm like, they look like me. They have similar features. And it was almost like a big sense of comfort because I haven't seen it in so long, because I have been in West Texas for most of my collegiate career. But I mean, obviously homesickness is a thing. And so being able to share traditions and cultural jokes, that's been hard because I don't really have many people to kind of share that with. But thank God for social media. I can just kind of pick up the phone and call my cousins, or TikTok's kind of become a really big thing. So there's comfort in that too, just seeing Polynesian jokes and all that kind of stuff, and still staying true to who I am. Moving to college, I think one of the biggest challenges I had to face was I lost a bit of sense of self. And by self, I meant more of my Polynesian side, because I hadn't been around my family a bunch, and I also just wasn't in the community that I grew up growing up with. Which was predominantly immigrants. And so just making sure that you stay true to yourself was one of the most important things, because I am a very proud Polynesian. I'm a very proud Samoan, and I'm proud of the way that my parents brought me up. So I never want to lose sight of that, especially with my kids. That's still a long way down the road. But just being able to hand down what my parents handed down to me has also been another adversity I've had to overcome, because I don't speak Samoan fluent anymore, yet I still understand it. But just that was another challenge I had to kind of accept too. So hopefully I can go back one day and then be able to pick the lingo and the language back up. But just having more familiar faces has definitely been one of the challenges, because people don't really know what I am. Especially being in West Texas, where there's not a whole bunch of us out here. And so people just kind of assume that I'm either African American or I'm mixed or something. And so just being able to be I want to be identified as Samoan. So I think that's been another thing that I've tried to change around here, just being very proud about where I'm from and who I am and what I stand for. And so kind of goes back to that curiosity, when you took the pot stickers to school. It's I love it when people are curious. And so, I mean, I wish I had Samoan tattoos, probably wouldn't go down well with my family. But that's another tradition that's a conversation starter. So you want people to be curious about it. And so instead of looking at it as a challenge, I kind of look at it as something that I can embrace and promote. So and being able to do things like this. So yeah,
that's something we've talked about as an athletic staff. Recently we've talked about staying curious about people and being less judgmental and just being openly curious to learn and all that stuff. And it also seems like here there's a theme of authenticity that just keeps permeating through this conversation. Staying authentic and trying to maintain that authenticity. So it's all very interesting. As far as our greater society, how can we better support members of the Asian American or Pacific Islander communities?
Sorry. I mean, things like this are really helpful. And even just it is a whole month dedicated to us, but just promoting it more on campus and having events, even just food stalls where we can bring out traditional food and share traditions and share our stories, or even just documentaries about how we grew up, or even just kind of how we do Black History Month amongst our team. We were allocated allocated to present before practice, and so maybe if we could do the same thing where we could pick a historical figure and Asian or Pacific Islander communities and just speak about the history of where we come from, because it's not really spoken about. And I don't think there's like a big population here. And so just being able to bring attention to that, because I think there is a significant amount of Polynesians that contribute in the athletic community, especially like in the football realm of things. And so, yeah, I think that would be a way to kind of promote us.
Yeah, I like to echo with what Ella says. I feel like the panel discussion like this is so helpful, and then to identify the API groups in our community. And like a library actually has an exhibition right now for the Asian women in the American legal history. And then I was walking by, I was like, whoa, I didn't know that we have like a Asian female Secretary of State in California, like back in like 1980s, and I was like, whoa, this is really cool to know. And so I think this is the things that if we have more of these kind of activities and events happening on campus, on social media, and then even the audience spending the time watching these video recording, I feel like can help us to know and be curious about each other more.
Yeah, absolutely. Those publicity and events are very, very important. But on the other hand, I also think that, in terms of university curriculum, if there are more courses that be taught on these themes, I think that'd be really good. Right now I'm teaching at a graduate level. I've developed a course recently titled Trans-Pacific American Literature, and trying to introducing some texts related to South Pacific and Hawaii. And actually, just a few days ago, I was in exchange with a creative writer and a scholar based at the University of Hawaii. And he just told me that he co-edited a volume of about Pacific Island literature, something like that, an anthology. So I was thinking of, consider adopting it for my graduate class. But also I hope that, undergrads can also be exposed to some of their writings, their concerns. And, I wrote on one, Sumean writer, creative writer, Ha'ofa, and his poems and his theories about the way of perception, because islanders typically could be dismissed by people as unimportant, irrelevant. And so instead of say our isolated islands, he said our sea of islands, So by rephrasing those things, by calling attention to their own history and culture. And I think that's really a different way to get rid of this the history of colonialism and upon Pacific Islanders. I think that's really important. Not just the Western colonialism, but also to some extent Asian colonialism as well, because Japanese during Second World War also asserted a lot of influence, colonized many of the islands as well during Second World War, in that period. So I think this history negotiation are kind of really important, particularly in Hawaii and to a lesser extent to Pacific Islands, Oceania. I think their experience, their history, their cultures, their literatures should be also shared and taught at Texas Tech as well. So I hope I can, start doing that, and I hope that more people were doing that as well, in the future. We'll be doing that. Yeah.
And it sounds like we have a lot of resources. Living in a college town like Lubbock and having Texas Tech right here, we have resources to learn and better understand, whether it be on campus through lecture series or just through social media as well. Mm-hmm. So one last question before we go. So for anybody who's a member of the AAPI community, that may be struggling through their experience here, what's some advice you might give to someone like that?
I would say, don't be afraid to reach out and to ask for help. If you see, if you feel lonely or afraid or feel uncomfortable of something, maybe you are not alone. So don't be afraid. And remember to reach out for help. And then there are a lot of people on campus, including your faculty, us, and then look for your peer, and then ask for resources. And then my office is in McLennan Hall 206. And then if you think I can be of any help to you, please reach out, and then I will be more than happy. I will be here for you.
I think one advice is actually I think among Asian American and Pacific Islanders there should be more conversation, more sharing of experiences, because I mean for Latinx, so to speak, there is like a common another language, the Spanish, that is shared. So even for immigrants, there are a lot of they could share a lot of experiences, language, cultures, and also the religion, or like Catholicism. But for Asian American, Asian Pacifics, we back, we did not have a common language, or did not have a common culture, or religion. So even though like there are some, but not like covering all the area, because Asia is Asian Pacific Island a really large area, So I think a conversation among ourselves are also important. Sharing experiences are important. So once we start doing that, we may realize that there are a lot of support among ourselves. We can fall back on. So that's I just encourage that. If there should be a kind of organization, association that would connect all the cultures or peoples, and then have conversations, sharing food among ourselves. It's also important, because it's diverse. It's not even among Asian Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders. It's diverse. It's not like one culture, one society, one religion, etc. So that's important, and also like sharing with others, university community at large. I think those are also very, very important.
Ella, do you have any advice for maybe the next generation of student athletes that come through Texas Tech?
I would say always remember why you came here. That is a constant reminder of why I persevere every single day. I would definitely say reach out to your coaches, if you're going through something. I know in the Pacific Islander community, we're usually, I wouldn't say scrutinized, but we're expected to withhold our emotions or how we're feeling about stuff. And so it's really important, don't be afraid to express what you're going through or how you're feeling about stuff. And also to just not isolate yourself. There's been stages where I've isolated myself, and that's just not good for us. So just reaching out to whoever you need help from, and getting really involved with your community, and getting involved with your teammates and the rest of the athletic board and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, that would be my piece of advice to any Pacific Islanders coming through. But yeah, definitely just remember to stay the course. It's going to get better, and to just remember everything and every reason that you came here. And I know for us specifically, it's faith, family, and food. So those are our core values. And so I would just encourage you to really take that on and use that as your motivation to get through.
Well, I want to thank you all for joining and taking the time to speak today. This is an awesome resource, and we really do appreciate you all coming on behalf of Texas Tech Athletics.
Well, thank you for having us.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
And follow Texas Tech Athletics on social media for more information on future Hidden Figures episodes.
Welcome.